that time, I consider the years I spent on I Love Lucy to be perhaps the biggest rip-off of my career.
Vivian Vance and William Frawley became household names as the lovable neighbors Fred and Ethel Mertz on I Love Lucy, which aired from 1951 to 1957. Their on-screen chemistry won over millions of viewers, but behind the scenes, the reality was very different. Vance harbored deep resentment toward Frawley, and their relationship turned into one of Hollywood's most infamous feuds. The story of what really went on has long been downplayed or hidden, but once you discover what Frawley did, you'll understand exactly why Vivian could never forgive him. Don't jump ahead, this isn't your typical behind-the-scenes drama. Things ran far deeper, and the ending? It's something else entirely. Where it all began, day one on set. When Lucille Ball was putting together her new show, I Love Lucy, no one could have predicted it would become a cultural phenomenon. Back then, it was just an idea being pieced together. Lucy, always clear in her vision, had a strong sense of who she wanted to play Ethel Mertz. Her first choice was Bea Benaderet, a highly talented actress. Unfortunately, Bea was already committed elsewhere and couldn't accept the role. Lucy then considered Mary Wickes, a close friend with plenty of comedic talent. Mary, however, turned the offer down, not due to lack of interest, but because she didn't want their friendship to be strained by work dynamics. That kind of loyalty is rare and commendable. Meanwhile, Desi Arnaz, Lucy's husband, was deeply involved behind the scenes. While the public knew him as Ricky Ricardo, he was also a powerful force in the production process, working hard to get the casting just right. You might assume that being part of such an iconic show would bring everyone together. But beneath the cheerful exterior of I Love Lucy, tensions were brewing, especially between Vivian Vance and William Frawley. This wasn't casual disagreement, Vance outright despised him. The real question is, what caused such animosity between two actors playing a loving married couple? Casting Fred Mertz. At one point, Lucy considered casting James Gleason, a character actor she had worked with on Miss Grant Takes Richmond. She believed he'd be perfect for Fred Mertz. The professional chemistry was there, but Gleason priced himself out of the role by demanding $3,500 per episode, a steep sum for the time. The studio rejected the idea immediately. Then came William Frawley. At 64, he was already a vaudeville legend with nearly 100 film credits. Instead of waiting to be contacted, he took the initiative and called Lucy himself. CBS wasn't thrilled. Frawley had a reputation for heavy drinking, and network executives were hesitant. However, Desi Arnaz believed in him and advocated for his inclusion, with one firm condition: Frawley had to sign a contract stating that if he ever showed up drunk, he'd be fired on the spot. Frawley accepted the terms without hesitation, he wanted the role that badly. An uncomfortable age gap and image struggles. While Fred and Ethel were endearing to audiences, the actors behind them had no such warmth. One major factor in their strained relationship was the significant age difference. Frawley was 64, while Vance was only 42. That's a 22-year gap, and for Vivian, it wasn't a minor detail. She couldn't help but feel like she'd been paired with someone who looked more like a retiree than a husband. Initially, things between them were polite. But as time went on, Vivian began to question the casting more openly. She would see herself as still young and vibrant, while Frawley appeared visibly aged and grumpy. She even commented during rehearsal, "Nobody will believe I'm married to that old goat." Frawley heard her, and the atmosphere between them instantly soured. From Vance's perspective, the whole setup felt unfair. Here she was, a talented actress entering her prime, cast alongside someone who looked more like a distant relative than a romantic partner. Meanwhile, Lucille Ball, who was close in age to Vance, got to play the glamorous wife of the charming Desi Arnaz. The contrast was impossible to ignore. The production team didn't make things easier for Vance either. They deliberately styled her in unflattering clothes and makeup, emphasizing her role as the dowdy sidekick. While it served the show's comedic dynamic, it chipped away at her self-esteem. And despite being the same age as Lucy in real life, Vivian was positioned in a supporting role that felt demeaning. It wasn't just vanity, it affected her sense of dignity and professional identity. Tensions on and off screen. Audiences began noticing the disconnect between Fred and Ethel. Rumors circulated that their marriage seemed phony, even miserable and sexless. Vance felt that judgment deeply. Every time she had to show affection toward Frawley, it felt unnatural. She refused to kiss him on screen, instead mastering the art of the air kiss, a stage gesture that looked real without any actual contact. In the episode Equal Rights, there's a scene in a jail cell where the script called for a kiss. Watch closely, there's no real kiss, just stiff body language and an eye roll that says it all. And Frawley? He didn't take things lying down. He was notoriously petty, even influencing the writers to insert jokes that mocked Ethel's appearance. One memorable line referred to her figure as a sack full of doorknobs. Pretty savage, right? But here's the twist, it actually worked. That sharp tension between them? It somehow made the show even funnier. Their constant back and forth felt genuine because it was. This wasn't just performance, it was real animosity disguised as scripted comedy. And audiences couldn't get enough of it. Still, that kind of hostility takes a toll. For Vivian Vance, the discomfort wasn't just about the jokes or those dowdy costumes. It was about being stuck in a role and relationship that felt stifling. She could never fully break free from Ethel Mertz, the nagging wife of an older man, no matter where her career went. The role clung to her like something sticky you can't shake off. And every time she thought about I Love Lucy, she didn't just see the fame and laughter, she saw the personal compromises that came with keeping that role alive. And then, when CBS pitched the idea of a Mertz's spin-off, it should have been a big moment, a major opportunity. They even dangled a $50,000 bonus as an incentive. But Vivian flat out refused. No, she said. Not for money. Not for legacy. She simply couldn't bear the thought of spending more time with William Frawley, especially without Lucy and Desi acting as buffers. Turning down that kind of money just to avoid working with someone again? That speaks volumes. So yeah, their dynamic on screen was iconic. But behind the laughter was an undercurrent of tension that never really went away. That 22-year age gap? It wasn't just a number. It symbolized missed chances, damaged self-worth, and a heavy professional weight Vivian carried long after the final curtain call. It's wild, really, how something so painful in real life can make for such great television. Makes you wonder what other classic shows were built on real tension, doesn't it? Everyone loved Fred and Ethel's constant bickering, but what if the friction wasn't just good acting? The truth is, Vivian Vance didn't just dislike William Frawley, she despised him. And for years, no one really knew the full story. Fans speculated. Rumors flew. But the truth stayed hidden, until recently. So what was the real issue? Was Frawley truly unbearable? Did Vance overreact? Or was their feud rooted in something deeper than just workplace clashes? If you think this was just another petty Hollywood squabble, think again. Stick around, because the full story is juicier than anything the writers ever put on the show. It started subtly, with chilly silences and uncomfortable tension, but eventually, it erupted into one of the most notorious feuds in classic television history. And honestly, it escalated quickly. Imagine being on the set of one of America's most beloved sitcoms, and instead of enjoying the camaraderie, you're giving each other side eyes between takes, trading sarcastic remarks, and counting down the minutes until you can leave. That was the daily reality for Vivian and William. Their on-screen chemistry as Fred and Ethel Mertz made audiences laugh, but behind the scenes? It was full-on drama fueled by deep resentment. It didn't help that Vivian made a shady, if not brutally honest, remark about not liking the idea of being paired romantically with that old man. That was a jab William Frawley didn't take lightly. He was furious. And according to Greg Oppenheimer, son of the show's producer and head writer, Frawley took it deeply to heart. That one comment was enough to ignite a full-scale war. And the situation only got worse. Frawley had a reputation in Hollywood, one that wasn't flattering. He was known for being brash, mean-spirited, and particularly unpleasant toward women. Audrey Kupferberg, who co-authored Meet the Mertzes, flat out said he was considered a woman-hater. Add to that a serious drinking problem and a hair-trigger temper, and it's no wonder the two couldn't get along. At one point, Frawley even used vulgar language to describe Vivian in public, dropping the C-word in an interview. It was ugly. Their feud wasn't some behind-closed-doors secret. Everyone knew. It was so obvious that you could pick up on it just by stepping on set. But despite the deep-rooted bitterness, they somehow managed to stay professional. They showed up, delivered their lines, and kept the show running smoothly. Still, the animosity was unmistakable. Every scene between Fred and Ethel hummed with an underlying tension that wasn't acting, it was real frustration dressed up as comedy. And that's what gave their scenes such spark. You ever watch a couple argue on screen and think, this feels too real? That was Fred and Ethel. Frawley often slipped in unscripted insults about Ethel's looks or quirks. Vivian, never one to back down, responded with barbs like "OL Fat Freddy." These jabs weren't always part of the script, they came from a very real place of dislike. It was petty. It was personal. But it clicked on camera. In a strange way, some TV historians believe that their mutual hatred may have actually enhanced the show. Their constant fighting felt so authentic because, quite frankly, it was. That absence of warmth between Fred and Ethel wasn't just a 1950s TV trope, it was a reflection of their off-screen reality. The magic of their scenes came from real-life resentment, and somehow, that gave the show its edge. But any hope of reconciliation? That was never in the cards. When I Love Lucy ended, CBS proposed a spin-off centered around Fred and Ethel. Frawley was on board, likely enticed by the paycheck, but Vivian wasn't having it. She refused. Point blank. There was no way she was going to spend one more day working alongside him. And that was the end of that. No reunion, no photo ops, no polite pretending. Just a clear and final no from Vance. And really, can you blame her? So no, this wasn't your garden variety disagreement. This was a feud that stretched over 6 seasons, left scars on both their careers, and still sparks conversations to this day. It's the kind of grudge that leaves a permanent mark on Hollywood history. And when you think about it, it's almost ironic. The couple that made America laugh every week, the duo whose comedic timing helped turn I Love Lucy into a timeless classic, couldn't even tolerate each other off-screen. They couldn't even share a dressing room without drama. That's how deep it ran. They pushed through. Despite all the tension, the bitterness, and the behind-the-scenes drama, they stayed the course, did the work, and, somehow, gave us some of the most unforgettable moments in television history. It's strange, isn't it? How some of the most toxic working relationships end up producing the best art. How does that even happen? Maybe that's just the strange magic of show business, where love and hate blur together, and even the most mismatched partnerships can somehow create pure gold on screen. The spin-off that never happened. The year was 1957, and I Love Lucy was wrapping up after completely revolutionizing television. It wasn't just another sitcom, it was the sitcom. The show had it all: heart, chaos, comedy, and just enough drama to keep audiences coming back. Most fans were drawn to Lucy's hilarious antics and Ricky's charm, but there was something undeniably special about the other couple, Fred and Ethel Mertz. That cranky landlord and his sharp-tongued wife were a riot in their own right, constantly bickering but somehow always endearing. So when CBS and Desilu Studios floated the idea of a Fred and Ethel spin-off, fans were understandably thrilled. Just imagine it. And it wasn't some half-baked suggestion tossed around in a casual meeting. This was a fully developed, seriously considered plan. CBS, the television giant, and Desilu, the powerhouse studio led by Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz, were both fully on board. Desi himself personally approached William Frawley and Vivian Vance with enthusiasm, pitching the idea, "How about we give Fred and Ethel the spotlight?" It was a clean, simple, and genuinely brilliant concept with loads of potential. Fans adored the Mertzes. Their love-hate dynamic added an entirely new layer to the show's humor and charm. They were that bickering but loving couple next door, relatable, funny, and beloved. Producers had a slew of ideas. Maybe Fred and Ethel would move to Los Angeles or Albuquerque and get into brand new misadventures, cross paths with familiar faces like Carolyn and Charlie Appleby, or meet quirky new neighbors. The possibilities were endless. William Frawley, who played Fred, was immediately on board. He saw it for what it was, a golden chance for steady work in a tough industry, especially for an aging actor. In his 70s, Frawley had seen it all, from vaudeville to film, and understood how important it was to stay relevant in a changing television landscape. This wasn't just a creative opportunity, for him, it was a matter of career survival. Who could blame him for saying yes? But this is where it all fell apart, and wow, it got messy. Vivian Vance, who played Ethel, wasn't just hesitant. She flat out refused. Not a maybe later or let me think about it kind of no, this was an absolute shutdown. She didn't just decline the offer, she metaphorically locked the door, threw away the key, and set the house on fire. And here's the shocking part, they offered her a lot of money. We're talking serious, can't ignore it kind of money. Bonus checks and big salaries. Most people would at least pause. But Vivian didn't even blink. So, why walk away from a guaranteed hit and a financial windfall? The reason is as juicy as it is tragic. First off, she couldn't stand William Frawley. Their working relationship was filled with years of tension, snide remarks, and deep-rooted dislike. She had tolerated him on I Love Lucy, likely because Lucy and Ricky were there to keep things from boiling over. But the thought of working side by side with him alone, week after week? That was a deal-breaker. Imagine spending every day with someone who gets under your skin, without a buffer? No thanks. Second, she genuinely didn't believe the Mertzes could carry a show on their own. And, honestly, that was a pretty insightful take. Vivian recognized that the real magic of I Love Lucy came from the chemistry between the four main characters. Fred and Ethel were hilarious, sure, but mostly in the context of Lucy and Ricky's world. As leading characters on their own? She wasn't convinced. And she might have been right. There was more to it, though. Vivian was thinking about her future. She'd been Lucy's sidekick for years, always funny, always dependable, but always second fiddle. Always the punchline. Playwright Kim Powers once noted that she began to wonder, is this all I'll ever be? Just the sidekick? That kind of self-doubt isn't about ego, it's about growth. About wanting more. About refusing to be stuck in a box the industry kept trying to stuff her into. And then came the fallout. Frawley was furious, deeply angry. From his perspective, Vivian's refusal wasn't just about the show. It felt personal. She was rejecting his chance at security, at a comeback, maybe even at a comfortable retirement. Their already shaky relationship completely imploded. Whatever fragile civility they had left was gone. You could practically hear the final door slam shut between them. The tragedy? This could have been a piece of television history. Some experts even compared Fred and Ethel to the Ropers from Three's Company, that bickering landlord couple who eventually got their own successful spin-off. Fred and Ethel had that same kind of potential. But because of a feud that had been quietly simmering for years, that potential was never realized. This wasn't just a missed opportunity. It was one of the biggest what-ifs in TV history, all because two people couldn't stand each other enough to make it work. Makes you wonder, right? How many incredible things have never happened simply because people couldn't put aside their differences? It's wild to think about. We'll never know what that spin-off could have been. Maybe it would have failed. Or maybe it would have been another timeless classic. What we do know is that behind the laughter, behind the black and white smiles, real tension shaped what we got to see, and what we didn't. Vivian Vance and William Frawley weren't just co-stars who didn't get along. They harbored deep bitterness that lasted for years. And when Frawley died, people expected a moment of grace from Vance. A kind word. A respectful tribute. But what she said instead shocked everyone. Vance's reaction to Frawley's death. William Frawley passed away on March 3, 1966. For most, that marked the end of an old Hollywood figure's life. But in truth, his death also symbolically ended one of television's most bitter, long-lasting, and absolutely irreconcilable feuds. So, who is on the other end of this legendary grudge? None other than Vivian Vance, the actress who played Ethel to William Frawley's Fred on I Love Lucy. Just think about it, over a decade of pretending to be best friends on camera while secretly despising each other behind the scenes. That was the heart of their working relationship, 15 years of smiling through clenched teeth, each wishing the other was on a different planet. When Frawley died of a heart attack at 79, Vance's reaction wasn't what anyone would have expected. In fact, buckle up, because it was wild. Vivian happened to be enjoying a meal at a restaurant when someone approached her with the news of his passing. A typical response might have been a moment of silence, a somber nod, maybe a quiet "oh dear." But Vivian didn't even pause. She lifted her glass and declared, "Champagne for everybody." Can you believe it? That wasn't just a reaction, it was a declaration. A full-blown release of years of pent-up resentment, served faster than the champagne itself. And this wasn't whispered in a corner. It was loud. It was public. And it spread like wildfire through Hollywood. But before we judge her as cold or unfeeling, let's understand what drove that reaction. This wasn't about a couple of tense moments on set. It was about enduring Frawley's constant drinking, his biting remarks, and his generally toxic presence. Working with him had been exhausting. Vivian had weathered his drunken insults, erratic behavior, and a complete lack of tact for years. You know the saying, time heals all wounds? Not in this case. For Vivian, the wound deepened the longer their professional lives were intertwined. What's even more remarkable is that by the time Frawley died, I Love Lucy had been off the air for nearly a decade. 10 years. You'd think the bitterness might have dulled over time. But no, Frawley continued to occupy space in her mind, not with nostalgia, but with irritation. The sharpness of her response made it clear, even the mention of his name was still enough to set something off inside her. The pain hadn't dulled. The anger hadn't faded. It had just been simmering, waiting for a release, and in that moment, it exploded. It's ironic, really. Fred and Ethel were beloved by America. They were TV's favorite landlords, with a perfect comedic rhythm and lovable chemistry. Audiences adored their squabbles, thinking it was all part of the act. But the truth? That on-screen tension was entirely real. It was two people barely able to tolerate each other, channeling their mutual disdain into performances that made television history. Isn't it crazy to think that one of the most iconic duos in TV couldn't even stand to be in the same room off camera? It makes you wonder, how badly does someone have to wear on you, day after day, for their death to bring celebration instead of sorrow? And how deep must that resentment run to still be burning after 10 years of no contact? Vivian Vance never found closure. There was no let bygones be bygones, no late-in-life reconciliation. Just pure, enduring resentment. That champagne toast wasn't a petty jab, it was her final word in a long, bitter story she never asked to be part of. Imagine being chained to someone professionally who drains every ounce of joy from your day for 15 relentless years. That's not just difficult, it's emotional warfare. And perhaps the saddest part? They never made peace. Not even a hint of it. It's tragic when you think about it. These two actors brought so much joy to audiences, yet were privately miserable. Fans saw the magic, but never the storm behind the scenes. And in just 5 unforgettable words, champagne for everybody, Vivian ripped the curtain back and showed the truth. That line wasn't just a zinger. It was years of pain, frustration, and resentment bursting out all at once. So yes, while William Frawley's passing may have been quiet, the fallout certainly wasn't. Vivian Vance's reaction made it abundantly clear that she was done carrying that emotional baggage. In that moment, she let it go, popped the cork and moved on, in the only way she knew how. And honestly, it might just be the most brutally honest farewell Hollywood has ever seen. With that, we wrap up this video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more. For more dramatic tales from behind the scenes, click on the next video popping up on your screen.